Well, as Gavin's case heads to the Supreme Court next month, it could expand transgender rights or roll them back.
We want to bring in CBS News Justice reporter Paula Reid to clarify things for us. Let's talk a bit about this, Paula. We know that Title IX bans discrimination based on sex in schools that receive federal money. But an issue here with Gavin's case is whether or not it bans discrimination based on gender identity. So can you explain the argument to us?
Sure. Gavin's lawyers argue that sex includes your gender identity, that sex doesn't just mean whatever your anatomy is, that it's broader than that. And the Obama Justice Department agreed with them. That's why they issued that guidance to schools saying that you cannot discriminate against students. You should allow them to use a bathroom that corresponds with their gender identity, even if that is different than their anatomical gender. But the other side of this case, they argue that sex means whatever is on your birth certificate, anatomy, biology, and they say that that is a perfectly reasonable way to determine what restroom or what facilities a student uses. As we know, the Trump administration has withdrawn the Obama Justice Department guidance, and they agree with the opposition. They agree with Gavin's school that children should choose their facilities based on the sex on their birth certificate.
Paula, oral arguments in Gavin's case are expected to be heard on March 28th, and confirmation hearings for Judge Neil Gorsuch are expected to start a few days before that. Why is the timing so crucial in this case?
Well, just last night, the Supreme Court asked both sides of this case. They said, where do we go from here? Because the Fourth Circuit's decision was very much based on what the Obama Justice Department said. They really put a lot of stock in that. And the Supreme Court is now asking both sides, well, does that change things now that the federal government has changed its stance on this issue? Where should we go from here? Should we still consider these issues? And Vlad, the Supreme Court has a lot of different options here. First, they could decide to still hear the case. They could also send it back down to the lower court, or they could just delay it and say, look, we want to see how this hashes out, what more the administration has to say on this. And if it chooses one of those last two options, sending it to a lower court or delaying it, then, assuming Neil Gorsuch is confirmed, then they would have that ninth justice. And his participation in this issue could change its final outcome.
So how will the White House's move to reverse the Obama-era guidelines then impact Gavin's case?
It really does undermine his case because his victory at the Fourth Circuit was largely based on the fact that the Justice Department, the federal government, agreed with him. They looked at the federal law and they had an interpretation of those words that matched what his is. Now, the White House right now is trying to argue that this is a states' rights issue. The problem with that is we are arguing about federal law. And for schools to get their federal funding, they have to comply with federal law. And so it is ultimately up to the federal government to help schools interpret what exactly these laws mean. So it does seem that there's so much confusion on each side, and that's really why both sides still want to go to this argument in March and have the Supreme Court rule somehow on this issue and give them some sort of clarification.
All right, Paula Reid breaking it down for us. Thank you, Paula.